What's up, guys? This is Pedro from my Stuttering Life, where you will hear the good, the bad, the very ugly. We're gonna laugh, we are gonna cry, but through it all, just know you are not alone. So, let's get started. This is episode number 33, and my featured guest is Jason Curtis. Mr. Curtis has been involved with horses and horse shows for the majority of his life. For many years, he had operated Oakridge Farms, a breeding and boarding operation in Florida, but decided to pursue his dream of becoming a full-time horse show announcer. He started announcing at a local horse show when he was asked to fill in for the regular announcer. The rest, as I say, is history. Today, he announces shows nationwide. In addition to announcing, Jason is producing his equine podcast series, Welcome to the Barn, which is available on all podcast directories including iTunes and Google Play. He has been featured in World Dressage news, has announced the equestrian portion of the Modern Pentathlon, and in January of 2015, he announced the first ever USEF recognized Western Dressage show. He is a regular announcer at many hunter and jumper shows in Florida and dressage shows up and down the East Coast. Mr. Curtis is also a person who stuttered as a young man, but has learned ways to mostly control his stutter. I am honored to have him as a guest with me on my Stuttering Life. Welcome, Mr. Curtis.
Hey, Joe. Thank you so very much for inviting me on your show. I'm a fan, and I've listened to almost all of your episodes to date. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. It is a pleasure to have you on my Stuttering Life. So we have many topics to cover, so let's get started. Do you remember the first time you began to stutter?
It's funny. I'm kind of coming out of the closet, if you will, on your podcast about my stutter. Someone recently asked me, who cares very much about me and my career, and she said, "But you don't have a stutter. What are you going to do? Fake it?" And she asked me why I was doing this podcast. And it's taken me a while to come up with the most truthful answer I can. And this is the best answer I've come up with. The fact that you don't see a drug addict or an alcoholic who is addicted, but you don't see them using, doesn't mean they're not. Or maybe they're going to NA, or maybe they're going to AA. I have been successful hiding my stutter for a very long time. But to answer your question, you had a bad experience with a dog, and you contribute your stutter to that. What I'm about to say is a little shocking to many, and I don't remember how old I was, but I was between 4 and 8, but I know the cause. At the time, my dad had a friend living in the basement of our house. I don't know the whys, and it doesn't really matter here, but he was living with my family. Anyway, I think we had just gotten back from church as my mom, dad, brothers, my sister, we were all together, and that didn't happen much. My uncle was the pastor. Anyway, I'd come home. We had come home. I found this guy after he committed suicide, having used a shotgun to the roof of his mouth in the hall bathroom.
Oh my gosh.
Thankfully, to this day, I don't remember ever seeing him. I don't remember much of my childhood, but my family says shortly, if not the day after I found him, was when I started to stutter. So that's how I know from family memories and stories how I began to stutter.
Wow. So that was very traumatic.
Yes.
Wow. Does it run in your family? Does anyone else stutter?
No. But what's interesting is most of the men in my immediate family, I'm talking my father and my two brothers, we all sound very similar on the phone. The only way many people can tell us apart on the phone is our vocabulary. I'm a bit of a word snob. And what I mean by that is I really have a problem with unsweetened iced tea or people who say irregardless or hot water heater, but that's a totally different podcast. How do you take sugar out of tea to make it unsweet? That's my point.
Yes, sir. I agree.
If you hear my father on the phone, you hear military. If you hear me on the phone, you hear slow, deliberate speaking. If you hear my two brothers on the phone, you hear, I guess, what would be a Midwest Ohio accent where we all sound, but our voice quality is very similar. And people had a very hard time knowing who they were talking to unless they knew how we spoke, if that makes sense.
Yes, sir, it does. Have you ever had speech therapy and was it helpful?
I've had lots of speech therapy, and not only for stuttering, but also for my S's and THs. Many people will remember Sally and the seashore and their therapy. As a kid, I said my THs as a hard D. I'd say thank you, or dis, or dat. It's in the back. So not only was there lots of therapy for the stuttering, but there was a lot of S's and THs and a lisp and other things to kind of overcome as well.
We were in the same boat because I also had great difficulty with my S's, as you heard previously, and my THs. Basically, many of the consonants and two of the vowels I always have a hard time with, but I work through it. In high school, what was your experience as a stutterer in high school?
My sophomore year in high school, I spent in Georgia. At the time, I had an English teacher, Miss Mason. I will never forget this woman. She had really taken me under her wing. Her son was a stutterer. She said he sang in his head and spoke his words. For me, I always sang in chorus and choir. And like all of us, we don't stutter when we sing. I started trying it, and it worked better for me at the time than diaphragmatic breathing, which I still use, and I'm sure you've noticed already. It has been my crutch all of my life. And I don't think today I could speak without diaphragmatic breathing. Something else that I've become an expert doing is I can read a sentence or two ahead of what I'm currently saying. And yes, I also sing in my head. It's what makes my announcing and any audio recordings I do work. Over time, I've learned to cut out my hitch combinations as much as possible. Those consonants and combinations that don't work for me. Give me a script, I can say anything without a stutter. And yes, I'll admit, I've scripted most of my answers for the purpose of this podcast.
Well, let me tell you, scripts for me, my school life as a stutter was very isolated. And so in high school, found the drama club, and they welcomed me in. Whereas some of my peers would, mock, tease me that I could never do well in drama class because of my stutter. Although what I found out is during the plays, when I played a character, I was not Pedro. And so, therefore, I did not stutter because, like you, there was a script. And so I followed the script, I memorized it, and when it came time to do the play, it was awesome because I got every word out. I did not stumble. I did not have any blocks whatsoever. And there were a lot of people scratching their heads in the audience. And so I know where you are coming from. If I have a script and when I memorize it, I'm perfect. I'm great.
Well, your story about playing the lion in The Wizard of Oz, it's almost exactly the story I heard from the lips of one of the most famous voices in the world, who without a script had a very hard time speaking in his early years. And if you've never heard the voice of James Earl Jones,
Wow.
you have not seen a movie or watched much TV. James Earl Jones was a mentor, kind of. I went to a few classes where he was teaching and helping people in a stutter program up in Northeast Ohio at the time. And as a child, he had a very bad stutter. And that's when I learned at a young age to try and anticipate whatever questions I might be asked. And that's when I decided to start scripting everything. My brain, I'm one of those people who, my brain is very fast. And I think that's where I get my hitches, is from how fast my brain works. I have the world's sloppiest handwriting, but I can type. And I can type fast.
Like me.
Exactly. So that's where my story and your story kind of come together, I think. It is about when you were up there and you were the lion. I've been doing that most of my professional life because, like I say, most of my horse show announcing is by rote. And they've got ads that they will give me that, hey, we need this read, we need this done. They'll text me, we need you to say this for our sponsorships and things like that. And those are very easy for me to do because when I'm speaking something I'm reading, I'm a sentence and a half ahead reading what I'm saying. And that's a talent that I've gotten just by doing over and over and over and by rote and memory. If I memorize it, I can say it. If I don't memorize it and I have to ad lib, that's when I get into trouble.
That is my story as well. When I'm having a conversation and visually, I know the words that are coming down the pike. And let's say there are a couple of words that I know I will have a block on. As I'm having the conversation, I'm also thinking about replacing those words with easier words all at the same time. And when I'm done, I'm exhausted. How about you?
That's where I've tried to imagine. And the first time you and I contacted each other was about 3 weeks ago. So in my head and in paper, I have probably come up with 400 scenarios of questions that you might ask me. I am always the most prepared person in the room because I study and I read and I practice and I talk to myself. I'll talk to myself in the mirror and I will remember what my answers are supposed to be. And that's where I get away with a lot of things. It seems like, how does he always have the right answer, or he's a know-it-all? I don't mean to come across that way, but if you want me to ad lib, I'm shot.
Right. We have to work twice as hard as everybody else because I practice in front of my mirror for days and for hours on end, practicing for a job interview, practicing for a presentation. What what takes most people an hour or two to prepare for their presentation, it takes me days and weeks, because I know that I will have some blocks. So I have to practice. I have to memorize it. That way, when I'm giving my presentation, I will not have any problems. But I have to work twice as hard than everybody else. Going back to school, do you have any advice for parents and teachers regarding children who stutter?
I'm the baby in the family, so that's where this is coming from. Parents, don't let your siblings or cousins be mean. We get enough of that at school. Don't treat us different, and don't make excuses for us. Finish our sentences if it makes it more convenient, but don't think for us. Let us be whatever age we're supposed to be. Something that happened to me often was my mom would say, oh, he's slow, he's SLD, he's in all these special classes. I got enough of that at school to where, over the PA system, would Jason Curtis please report to the speech therapy class? Gee, thanks. You know, you and I are about the same age.
Yes, sir.
So when I think of you and me, I think we probably had a lot of the same experiences. Whether it be Northeast Ohio or whether it be Texas, kids all across the globe are cruel, and it shouldn't come from your family members. That's my advice to parents. Teachers, you can't control what they are or are not going to do. And in the early 80s, mid 80s, when we were in elementary and middle school, I had a few really great teachers. When I hit high school, I had two phenomenal teachers. Mr. Smidlin was my American history teacher, and he and I became fast friends. Later in life, his nephews and his niece would become my best friends, and I didn't know they were related at the time. And then Miss Mason, I was only in Georgia for 1 year, but she really, I guess the point is, teachers care about your kids like you used to. I don't know how else to put it. I don't think they're paid enough.
Right. Yes. Yes. Did you ever experience employment discrimination? And if you did, how did you deal with it?
No, but mostly because I've always worked for family or for myself. So the quick answer is no. For a short time after I graduated high school, and actually during some of the summers in high school, I worked on yachts. I was an avid scuba diver. So I would dive with guests. I would dive with the owners. In high school, I was going to go into the Marine Corps. Well, when you went to MEPS, you passed everything with flying colors. I passed the ADVABs fantastic, no problem. I wear glasses or contacts, and I have a slight heart murmur. Well, at the time, they would waive one medical, but not two. But because I had contacts or glasses, I also had the heart murmur I did not know about until I hit MEPS. And then they said, sorry, you cannot be a Marine. And that crushed me.
No.
So that's where I decided, okay, I'm going to go spend some time on the yachts and just go dive and do something fun. So that's where that experience for me is. And ever since then, I've always worked for myself or for family. And on the yachts, I didn't have to talk a whole lot because we're always in the water.
Right. My jobs were in data entry, so it was perfect because they were all quite amazed at my typing speed, at how fast I was with extreme accuracy. But when they would ask me to help cover the telephones when one staff member had to go to lunch, I would always decline and just pardon myself and go to the restroom and spend a lot of time in there until their lunch break was over. And so then I would go back out and say, okay, back to work. Have you ever experienced social isolation?
Well, I always tell people I hear voices and talk to myself all day. Both are more accurate, I think, than most people would realize. Imagine at a horse show, most announcers only announce 1 or 2 rings. I announce 4. Now, there's a whole lot of detail that goes into that, but let me just give you kind of an idea of what it sounds like. I have 1 hunter ring and 1 jumper ring on 1 radio channel. That's 4 people on 1 channel. I have another hunter ring and another jumper ring on another radio channel. So now that's 8 people. I then have the office and the EMT in the event of an emergency on a channel. I have the jump crew and all of that organization on yet another channel. And then I have my 4 or 5 in-gate people on another channel. So earlier when I said my brain works really, really fast, I'm listening to all these conversations, having to take down all these results and all these numbers and put them all into different Excel sheets. But that's how my brain works. I'm purposely talking slower than normal because the faster I talk, the harder it is for people to understand what I'm saying. And I want to make sure, for the purpose of this podcast, people are hearing what I am saying, because if I'm at normal speed, that's when I get my hitch. Because I can talk very fast, but my brain can go even faster, and that's when I hit my hitches. And that's when I'll spit and stutter and stumble over certain consonant combinations. And yes, I'm still reading this. And yes, I'm still doing my diaphragmatic breathing, because that is, as I say, my coming out, if you will, because not many people know I do this. So this is kind of like me saying, hi guys, I have a stutter. I know you came to terms with it when you were 40. Well, I'm 48, and I guess I've always known, I've never denied it. I haven't always embraced it either.
Once I turned 40, that's when I just told myself that this is it. I'm done. I am done with people thinking about my stutter, caring about what they feel. And when I did that, this huge weight lifted from me. Once I embraced my stutter, I took the power back. I took back control. Therefore, from that day onward, I could be talking to anybody. And when I stuttered, previously, I would get angry. And then it would turn into anxiety. And then it turned into depression. A huge roller coaster of my emotions. But when I learned how to when I took back the power and control, that's when my whole life had turned around. And like you, walking on to the stage, that would have terrified me but I learned to turn my fear and turn my 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 anxiety into I turned it into excitement. Therefore, when I would walk on stage, no more was I afraid. No more was I anxious. Like you, I could not wait to get up on stage because once I hit that stage, once they gave me the mic, that was it. I mean, it's kind of magical for me because never, ever, ever in my entire life would I have pictured myself on stage because I was told from a young age that I had a form of mental retardation, that I would never hold a job, that I would never get married, and that I should just be happy applying for disability and get my check once a month. That was me.
As typical men, we are extraordinarily prideful, and we want to have our voice in what we say. We want to be heard. We want to be accepted for what and who we are, no matter what that is. And that is if you have an IQ of 70 or you have an IQ of 170. We all want to just be accepted. And you have taken that back. And that's where I admire you so much in this process of your podcast of saying, hey, this is me. And I'm just now seriously in the last 3 weeks kind of coming to terms with that. And I'm not saying that for pity or anything else. I'm saying that more because I've had lots of encouragement. I've had lots of support. I've had lots of education on it. And I've never denied having a stutter, but I've always dealt with the symptoms. You get a cold, you take NyQuil and DayQuil. And my tools and my toolbox, I have studied and I have practiced and I have memorized and I have put to rote and I have tried so hard for so long to cover up what other people as a child and as an adult even laugh at and don't understand. The older generations, the people that are 70, 80, 90 years old, they called us retards. They called us stupid. They called us whatever, and we're not that. And what you are doing is saying, my name's Pedro, and I'm not that. And it's time for me to say, I'm not that. But I'm doing all this still from rote and from script. Does that make me a fake? I don't know. But I am doing this off of rote because I've memorized a lot of this stuff and I'm reading some of it from script because that's how, as a professional speaker, I cope. I'm paid for what I say. Do I stop doing what I'm doing, or do I continue doing what works for me professionally? That's my dilemma. I had my very best friend say, but you don't stutter, because she doesn't know what it is I do to prevent. I'm a perfectionist, and that's just how my mind works.
Have you ever experienced depression because of your stuttering? And if you did you seek treatment?
Haven't we all? I mean, seriously, growing up is hard enough, but we take our lumps like every other kid, and we just keep going. I have been in counseling for a very long time. I can't say it's caused by my stuttering. Is it a contributing contributing factor? Sure. I do drink socially. I refuse to become an alcoholic because every male member of my family is an alcoholic. And don't get me wrong, I've been known to get drunk a time or two, but I don't wake up at 5:30 in the morning to drink a six-pack before I go to work. And I don't put beer or liquor in a vending machine so that once the clock strikes 6 and the job is done, do I go over and put $1 in and grab a Budweiser out? And those are actual life experiences of mine. Do I drink socially? Yes. Do I seek treatment? I have had a therapist for years, and it's not all just for, well, none of it is really directly because of the stutter. I just think it's good practice for people in general. I don't go every week. I go when I feel I need to go, and that's how I kind of work it. Part of my depression is part of my therapy, why I go to therapy. When I finish a big horse show, or let's say even I just finished a 4-day show, and most 4-day shows start on a Thursday. Thursdays are professional days. It's your trainers, it's your top riders that are there getting horses ready for the amateurs and the children riders that are coming on the weekend. Friday is your professionals that got off at 9, 10 o'clock, noon, and are showing up for the show at 2, 3, and 4 o'clock to show. Saturday and Sundays are for those same amateur riders and adult riders. And of course, all the children then come out and ride on Saturday and Sunday if they're not in school. And so those days get really busy. So when that happens, I'm so G'd up and I'm so into my announcing and everything is going as planned and it's great. And then Monday morning, I crash because I'm not back at the horse show. Now I'm back in my own head and I get into this post-show funk because I know I've been talking all weekend long. I've done a really good job and now I'm by myself. And I've got the dogs to talk to, I've got a horse to talk to, but I'm by myself. And now what? And I will go through that funk for a day or two, sometimes 3. But now I'm writing articles and trying to post results and get interviews with people on my blog and on my website to say, hey, tell me your story. Or on my podcast, hey, come and tell me about this. But being in the booth from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, sometimes later than that, especially on Grand Prix nights, everyone, when the show is over, they're gone. So they're not there to talk to anymore. So then I go back to the house and I make myself some dinner, might have a cocktail just to relax a little bit because tomorrow morning I've got to be back there again. I have to leave the house by 6:30 in the morning to be there by 7:30 to be announcing by 8 o'clock to be going until 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening. And I'm the only announcer, although the in-gates also will announce. I have to cut my restroom breaks whenever I can. I eat in the announcer's booth. Everything I do is in the announcer's booth. Hardly anyone ever comes talk to you because they know how busy you are. But then when the day's over, again, you don't really have someone to talk to. So you go back. And then on the Monday morning, when you wake up at 4:30, because that's what time you wake up every morning to go to these horse shows, now you're in that funk because you have no one to talk to for a day or two. That's when I think I need to speak to somebody. And that's when I'll say, hey, can you fit me in for an hour? Or I'll go to the chiropractor because my back's sitting in the chair all weekend long. I'll go to the chiropractor on Tuesday and get adjusted, and that will make me always feel better. Or I'll jump in the Gulf of Mexico and swim for half an hour, 45 minutes, because it'll loosen everything back up again. And that becomes my therapy, my dogs, and swimming whenever I can. And that's how I recover. From a hunter-jumper world to a dressage world, it's very different. The hunter-jumper world is all about the hunters are all about being pretty and going very well, and the equitation is about how the rider sits upon the horse. And the show jumping is all about the fastest one to go clear without knocking any rails down. Well, sometimes the rails go flying and sometimes the riders go flying, where that's all exciting and wonderful. Dressage is so different because it's about the grace and the precision and the beauty of it. And from a performance side, as a voice, instead of just giving out a number. For example, as a hunter announcer, it would be next in the adult amateurs, number 123, here is Excalibur, owned and exhibited by Betty White. Number 123, here's Excalibur. And that's really all you would say about that ride. And you say that for every person that goes in the ring in that individual ring. Whereas in a dressage show, when you have these riders go into the ring, you would say, number 123, Excalibur. Excalibur is owned and exhibited by Betty White of New York, New York. Excalibur is a 17-year, 17-2 Dutch warm blood stallion by Rigoletto from the dam Melissa, whatever. Then the judge would ring the bell or blow the whistle, and the rider goes in to do their test. And I'll be announcing 3 of these rings. At the conclusion of their test, I'll know where they are in their test because I memorized the test as well. As they're coming down center line and they stop and they salute. And I will say, with the salute at X finishing their test in the 4th level test 2, number 123 Excalibur, owned and exhibited by Betty White. Betty White is a USDF bronze silver medalist and also holding her freestyle bar. Last year, 2000 whatever, they were the reserve champion in the 4th level test 2 at the regionals, and they were champion in the 3rd level test 3 at the regionals the year before, however it goes. From a performance side, the dressage is so much more interesting and so much more involved in the individuals and so much more personal. That show, ending those type of shows, is even a harder fall because you're so invested in the riders and you're so invested in the horses and what they don't get from other announcers, as opposed to a hunter jumper show where it's just names, numbers, and results.
You were talking about many techniques that you use, but what is your most effective technique that you do for fluency?
I plan everything. As I said earlier, and I'm reading this from script, I am always the hardest working person in the room. I research, I read, I watch YouTube videos, I talk to myself constantly in mirrors or otherwise. Diaphragmatic breathing is huge in my life. And head singing is what I call it. Scripting and rote. If I didn't memorize stuff or I didn't have scripts on much of what I do, if I have to improvise, I will head sing. Now, when I get talking at horse shows, it's very fast, and that's by rote. And it's automatic for me. It just comes out.
Wow. You just blew me away with all that.
I'm sorry.
That is amazing.
I know I gave you way too much information and edit out whatever you want to, but it's just, that's how it works.
Right.
And it goes back to the expert. When you know your material and you know your stuff and you are the smartest person in the room about that material, that's passion.
Yes, it is.
You don't work a job, any job, without at some level enjoying it. The less I talk, the more I stutter. The faster I talk, the more I stutter. If I don't talk to anyone for 2 weeks, which is very rare, I'm a spittin', sputterin', mumbling fool. I have to talk to keep my muscles fit and to keep on my A game. So I talk to myself, or I'll go record an audiobook, even though it may never be produced. I have to talk. And that's my solution. Conflict I have in my head. The more I talk, the easier it is. And what happens is I start to speed up, and I speed up, and I speed up. And I will be talking so fast, people go on the radio and say, Jason, we can't understand you. I have a joke that I tell people, but in some extent, it's the truth. I have 17 voices in my head and 2 mumblers. I have the voice I'm talking to you in now that is slow, controlled, and in charge. Then I have a little boy, I have a little girl, I have the mean guy, I've got the mean girl, I've got the preacher, I've got all these other voices in my head. And I think we all do to some extent. I just named all mine, and they help me through all my situations. And that's how it works for me.
You have the voices in your head to help you. Mine all have accents. For some reason, I don't know what it is, but in high school, during all those one-act plays, there were many different accents that I had to master. And so I practice and practice and practice. I practice in front of my mirror. And so what helps me out is the voices in my head. They all have different accents, and it just helps me out. We are all different. None of us are cookie cutter. We all have our own story. What helps me day after day, like you, I sing in my head, and the voices in my head that have accents, they help me out. There's a bad voice, negative voice, call him Oscar, and when he pops up, I just shut him down. Because I have no time for negativity. I have no time thinking about, that word I really messed up on. I feel dumb. I feel stupid. My heart hurts. I'm very angry and depressed and anxious, all rolled up into one. When that voice pops up, I gave it a name. And so I tell him to just keep quiet. But there are things that I do on a daily basis to just help me get on with my day, because I have things that I have to do, and my stutter isn't going to keep me from doing those.
Every once in a while, I like to let my Oscar out when I'm alone, when I'm in my own space, because for me, he's my yeller. He's the one that gets mad at the world. And if I don't let him out every once in a while, it builds up, and it builds up, and it builds up. And it becomes volatile in my own head to where if I don't let him go, his name is Kevin in my head, if I don't let him go, if somebody says something to me, and I've done this, unfortunately, I will blow up at them. So I would rather do that at home than at the grocery store or at the big box store. I am very impatient with people. If I go to one of the big box, like a Home Depot or a Lowe's, and the staff can't help me find something, I am known to say, you work here. Why don't you know where it is? In not such a nice way. And my voice as what it is, people think I'm biting their head off more than I actually am, because I do have a deep voice. And I talk in 3 registers. I talk in my chest voice, which I'm doing now, because I'm comfortable, I'm relaxed, I'm not worried about it. But then when I announce, I bring it up into my mid-range, so I'm kind of at the top of my chest, the bottom of my throat, where I'm a little more enunciated. And I'll come up to about here for my announcing, because this is what people can understand. better because the bass coming through some of the bigger speakers or whatever, but they can understand this voice a lot better than they can this one when it's amplified. And again, it's just different characters for me.
Had you ever tried voluntary stuttering? This was a during my years of speech therapy, we would practice voluntary stuttering, and I always had great difficulty with it. Have you?
I can't do it. And I think it's the same thing with counting backwards. How can you stutter when you've prepared to do it? When you count backwards from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you hit go, and you're going to make that phone call that you do, you have prepared yourself to do something. I think we try so hard to always do things correctly that for me to fake a stutter is impossible. I can't do that because I'm so used to my breathing. I'm so used to my crutches.
Me as well. Now, when you are all by yourself, when you are alone, do you speak without stuttering?
No and yes. It depends on where I am in my planning. And that's also scripted. Because if I am practicing, I will stumble. And depending on how comfortable I am with new material, when I'm reading something, I can go without having a single stumble. It's just like typing. If I'm typing 90 words a minute, I'll make a mistake here or there, but it will because I misread the line, not because I added a P, one of my other consonants that I can't say without practicing.
People ask me quite often, do I stutter when I read out loud? Do I stutter when I'm by myself? And the answer is yes. Wherever that I am, whatever that I do, I stutter. You know, I have my good days and then I have my bad days, but I have a stutter. I may have it for the rest of my life. Who knows? But, you know, counting backwards, that was a Mel Robbins tool that I learned from, and that was the tool that helped me to get on stage. That was the tool that helped me to make a phone call. That was the tool that helped me hit record on my first ever podcast. So we learn many tools and tricks to just help us keep going day by day.
There are 2 videos on YouTube that I love. And I don't know if you've ever seen LaRon Barton do his TEDx talk. But
yes, sir, I have.
One. I am very much in his mindset, I think, where, like him, I over-prepare. I always over-prepare. And there's another one that kind of excited me for a while, but I'm not sure if it's real. And it's Tony Robbins. And he has a gentleman that he says, I can fix your stutter.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's real or not. I honestly have had to question myself on that one. And I don't know if it's true or not. And I'm not trying to knock Tony or the gentleman that was in the video. That was extraordinarily impressive to me. If it's true, fantastic. I just can't believe talking to somebody for 4 or 5 days will stop someone from stuttering.
Right. Watching it felt the same way. How can that be? How can that be? Have you ever had encountered in your life where a person has asked, did you forget your name when they had approached you and were talking to you, or vice versa?
Absolutely. And here's someone will give me their name, and for the life of me, I cannot remember it. And I do two things here. Rote memory. I have memorized your name, Pedro. My name is simple. It's Jason. There are lots of Jasons out there. So when I go to Starbucks or I go somewhere else, I always use Xavier. There's lots and lots of Jasons out there, but I always use Xavier because really, how many Xaviers are going to be in a Starbucks at the same time? When you are out somewhere and your name is Jason or Mike or Dave or whatever your name is, if you're at a rock concert and you hear someone say Jason, whether or not they're talking to you, that's the most important word in our language. You're going to look to that person and you're going to say, I don't know you, or I do know you. Maybe they are talking to you. But if someone says Xavier, how many of us can there be? And that's the name I always use when I go out and I have to give them a name. And again, that's by rote. Xavier, Pedro, Jason. I will never stumble those words because now they're rote. If I have to improvise, I'm toast. And that's why I always use Xavier.
Now, my name at Starbucks, it ranges. There are times when I'll say Paco. There are hardly any Pacos in this area. And there are days that I will use Jorge. But the hard part, once I give them my name, when I go back to my table and get on my phone, my whole attention span is my phone. When they call out Paco or Jorge, I'm not even paying attention because my name's Pedro. And there have been times where I don't get my coffee because I forget, and they pass the person up and they go to the next customer. So I have to remember what name that I use for the Starbucks. There are literally in Houston, there is a Starbucks on every corner. So I have to watch out on what names and remember what name that I have used. So yes, I do feel your pain. I do. You were talking about, or in the introduction, you took over for a fellow announcer doing a horse show. And what I believe is that everything happens for a reason. Can you talk about that day that you took over?
I live in Davie, Florida. Plantation, Florida is a 5 to 7 minute drive up the road to get to this horse show ground. I'm also an hour south of Wellington. Wellington is like Kentucky for the hunter jumper world and dressage world, as Kentucky is for the thoroughbreds. Anyone east of the Rockies and some people west of the Rockies that can afford to put their horses on airplanes, and people from Europe come to Wellington for horse shows. But to get to that day, I would take my younger horses to Plantation because it's so close, to show them the new jumps, to get them used to being around horses they don't know. And I do this year in, year out, and this is what you do with your young horses. You have to take them to local shows to get them experience, because you don't want to take them straight to Wellington. You don't take them from your pastures to where you've trained them for a year or two and take them in that huge expense of Wellington. Just the class cost alone is prohibitive. So what you do is you take them to the local show and you show them. Well, at the time, Plantation Acres The announcer's booth was under a tree. The dirt was leftover baseball field, the clay, and someone had spread it out and started riding there. And then they formed a club, the Plantation Acre Saddle Club, and they started having shows there, Western shows to start. Quarter horses in the Western world are big down here, or were big at the time. So they would do 1 day Western and 1 day hunter jumper. So I would take my horses to the showground and show them there a lot cheaper. Well, 1 day, the announcer, who I'm assuming was a volunteer, had to leave. And so the show manager said, "Hey, Jason, would you please announce for us?" And I'd heard announcers my entire life doing this. So I said, "Sure, I can do this." So you call the flat classes, and all that is walk, trot, canter, back to the walk, reverse, walk, trot, canter, walk, line up. Not a big deal. I can do that. It's the same model I use today when I'm announcing 4 rings compared to announcing 1 or 2 that I learned way back then. And so the show manager after the show said, "Hey, would you be willing to announce our shows?" And I said, "I can't because I've got to bring my own horses. I'm not going to give up training my horses to announce your show." And she says, "Oh, bring your horses. You won't have to pay at all for the classes, and we'll have somebody cover for you whenever your horses are in the ring." Well, that's a win-win situation for me, right? I mean, why would I not do that?
Right. Wow.
So we're on this 2-ring show, and someone I know very well and have known for a long time, she comes up to me, and her name is Monica. And Monica says, "Hey, Jason, will you come up to Wellington and announce a dressage show for me?" And I said, "Monica, I don't know anything about dressage announcing. I would love to, but how hard can it be?" And she said, "Come up, give it a shot." I love the excitement of the hunter jumper world. It's fast, it's exciting, it's entertaining, it's NASCAR on horses. That's where my excitement comes from. But my love and my passion as an announcer is dressage. And that's the one thing, if I had to pick between hunter jumpers and dressage, my announcer heart says dressage because it's so much more intimate and so much more about the people and the horses and not just names and numbers. Now, I get close to that when we do the Grand Prix. The Grand Prix are fences that are 4'9" at the shows that I announce at. In the Olympics, they're 6 foot, 6'3". So we're talking a big difference here. I do that research on those horses and riders that I can simply, for dressage, go to a website or 2 and have all that information right there, and I can just say it. But I have to research for 3 or 4 hours if I'm doing a big show jumping Grand Prix, because there'll be 25, 35 horses in it, and all that takes time. And I've got to research much more websites than I do for the dressage. So I get close with the show jumping to announcing everyday dressage, but it has to be the Grand Prix level to get that same feeling of announcing dressage shows. Obviously, the dream show is the Olympics. Everyone wants to announce the Olympics. I would love to announce the Olympics, but my heart really for dressage are the Paralympics. And I say that because I've gotten to know many of the riders on the U.S. Para team. And it is competition. It's not everyone that shows up gets a ribbon or gets a trophy. The Paralympics are a real, honest-to-goodness competition. And these riders like Roxy that were able-bodied, let's call them for a lack of better terms, riders younger in life, she had some kind of a stroke, but she continued to ride. And she came back as a para rider. She's showing for the United States an international competition at top level dressage that as an able-bodied person, she would have had to have won the lottery to be able to go to the Olympics. But these team members, you fall in love with their personalities and their love and their desire for riding. I would be happy to announce the Olympics one day. I would be honored to announce the Paralympics. And to me, that's a huge difference. The Paralympics are something where, again, my announcer heart says, this is what I want to do someday.
Wow. It's your passion.
It truly is. It truly is. The next Olympics is in Japan. I know the teams that are going from the United States, Canada, and England. I've met them all. And whether I'm there or not, I will be rooting them all on because they are extraordinary people. They are, I can't express to you how talented these riders are. Here's just a quick thing. The most difficult gait in dressage is the walk because there is no suspension. There is no elevation. It's just a walk. And some of these men and women can't do that without a horse. And they're doing it better than those people that are riding in the what we'll call, again, for a lack of better terms, abled body dressage. Their walk, they're getting 8s and 9s and 10s, 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, where riders in the able body Olympics will get 7s and 8s, maybe a 9. But it's the only gait they can do in some instances. Now, some do trot and some do canter, but your level 1 riders, your most severely afflicted riders, can only walk. And they're riding horses that have their own brains, that can do whatever they want to. And in some cases, these riders are strapped to the saddle of these horses. And yes, accidents do happen. But when you have people sometimes with no arms and are steering the horse with their mouth and their legs, or have no legs and are physically strapped to the saddle and are steering it just with their arms and some whips, you can't tell me that these people are not better athletes, or at least on the day, better than anybody that can do it with 2 arms and 2 legs and a full mental capacity. This is my passion. This truly is my passion. I can't express how much watching that would inspire anybody that knows horses or not. If once you get to know these people that are professionals in business, in finance, I believe one is a psychologist, their brains are perfect in most instances. Yes, some have had a stroke. One of the top U.S. riders in the world that was going to the Olympics for her second time, her horse tripped and fell, and she had a major TBI. She was on her way to China, the Olympic Games in China, and now she can't walk.
No.
And now she's back on the road to be on the U.S. team to represent the United States at the Para Games. She's not going to make Japan, but she will make the team eventually because she was the best rider in the country one day, and the next day she's in a coma for a month. I can't explain to you what that experience is like to watch somebody do something so well that most people can't even do, and then you see them get off a horse and into a wheelchair. It just boggles my mind. To get a horse to walk a straight line is one of the most difficult things you can do. And they're doing it better than the top Olympic riders in the world. I can't.
Wow.
YouTube it. YouTube Paralympics dressage. You will see things that will boggle your mind. And if they don't, you're not human.
How
and
awesome.
That's who I look at as who is inspiring to me.
I mean, that's just, wow. Wow.
And I hope it's coming out that way because it's, like I say, I don't care if you're flipping burgers or if you're selling stuff at a grocery store. At some point, you enjoy what you do. It's just I enjoy so much more what I do because I truly think this is what I was built to do. I found the job where as long as you fed me and were able to pay my mortgage, I would do it for free. I love what I do.
Awesome. Let's change gears a little bit. How was dating as as a stutterer?
Um, it was very stiff and it was very fake and it was tough. It was very hard. As a child growing up and from kindergarten to graduation of high school, I changed schools 18 times. Sometimes I went back to the same school that I'd been at a year or even 6 months ago, but childhood life was not the best. Family life was not the best. But if it were not for my grandmother and grandfather, I would not be the man I am today. My grandma and grandpa are my saving graces. Growing up and having moved every year, every 6 months or so was very tough. And dating was extremely complicated, not just because of the stutter, but because of the home life. I had the opportunity in middle school to go to Washington, D.C., and my first sweetheart, she was the one. And life took us different directions. And even today, because of how my coping mechanism is complicated.
Dating with me, or dating in my life, let me rephrase it. In high school, we had a homecoming. And so a part of our duties in the drama club is have to go to homecoming and get all dressed up. So that wasn't really a date. But the girl that I was with, Joanne Garcia, we were just really friends. But I did not have a true date until I was 25 years old. Like you, we moved around 12 times. So you have me beat by 6. We moved around so many times. It was difficult to make friends. Granted, no one wanted to hang around the kid who stuttered and sputtered and spit everywhere. And so basically I was just by myself. I would create games in my head, and characters, and that would help me pass the time. Then there was high school, and, it got a little worse. And then college, forget about it. And so it took one of my best friends to have me go on a blind date. My first ever date was a blind date. And here is okay, that night I knew about 2 weeks prior. And let me tell you, my heart was just hurting. I would just, thinking about it, I would sweat. My palms, my heart would hurt. I would have such terror. But my friend told me that you have to do this. You have to do this. And she just pushed me into the door, and it was love at first sight. Basically, the heart took over, and the heart doesn't care if you have a stutter. The heart does not care if you cannot pronounce your name. And right then and there, this was a changing moment because we are still together 24 years later.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. And so I hear from a lot of people who stutter, dating it's horrible. Granted, nowadays we have technology. You can text. But, back in our day, we had the telephones.
Way back in our day.
Exactly. And holy mac and cheese, I was just horrible on the telephone trying to say hello. And all you hear is extreme heavy breathing. On the other end, you hear that they will call the cops because some pervert is on the line trying to call. So yeah, back in the day, it was rough, but nowadays with all this new technology and texting, I believe it's gotten just a little bit better, but not by much.
My sister was always the one that would take the rotary phone off the kitchen wall and run that wire all the way down the hallway and into her bedroom and be on the phone for 3 or 4 hours with whatever his name is this week. And I went to 6 proms. I went my freshman year, I went my sophomore year, my junior and senior year. I went to 2 different proms. And I was involved in JROTC in high school always. Well, not always. One school, when I was in Georgia, the first high school I went to, I could not go to JROTC because they didn't have it yet. And then I transferred schools on purpose to go to a school that had a JROTC unit. And I did not get on at that school at all. But every ROTC unit also had an ROTC ball. So I went to lots of formals and I went to lots of dances. I couldn't dance, I couldn't talk, but I can sing and I can read poetry. But yeah, dating was more of a, I can't find a date. I'm a senior in choir or in chorus. Would you please be my date so I don't have to go alone? And that would be me.
Now, what has stuttering taught you?
I would say the biggest thing I learned is patience, understanding, and compassion for those that have visible difficulties and deformities. I have a big passion for people with muscular dystrophy. I had a nephew that unfortunately has died from Duchenne's a number of years ago. I won't look at a person in a wheelchair as less than. I will not look at another person that is obviously afflicted with something with pity. I will look at them with compassion and understanding that I think a lot of people can't do. When you get that stare and people are looking at you while you're trying to get something out, I know that pain. And for someone to be in a wheelchair and someone to say something stupid, like, oh, he's just a retard. I'm 6'5". I weigh 215 pounds. And I will walk up that person and say, apologize. And if they don't, that's when Kevin steps up. And Kevin says, you don't understand, son. You will apologize to not only the person in the wheelchair, but all of his friends or all of her friends or anyone around them. And you will do it in front of all of your friends. And you will learn a little bit of humility. And that's something I am known to do and freak some people out because I don't suffer people like that. When I see a bully, man, watch out, because I am that jerk.
Stuttering has taught me courage.
Mm.
We are extremely courageous, getting up every single morning and doing what we do. Stuttering has taught me empathy, which is huge because I can put myself into their shoes and I know how they feel. I can feel their stress levels. I can feel their fear. I can feel their anger. And so stuttering has taught me a great deal about myself and others, and that has proven extremely valuable in my life. Some people say that stuttering is a curse, but I can only speak for Pedro. Stuttering has been a blessing for me because I have learned a great deal about me through my stuttering. I know who I am. I know what I can and cannot do. But what what I have learned is that if I have positive people around me who are there to lift you up and support you, I can do anything. I can do anything that I want. And that is how I created a podcast. That's how I created a YouTube channel, because there were a, there were a lot of people, and I'm talking a lot of people, who told me, "Oh, that is a dumb idea. Nobody is going to listen to you stutter and spit and stammer and sputter." But when I got rid of those people, and those are vampires, they drain your energy. When I got rid of them and only had positive people around me, my whole world changed. There were now possibilities. The darkness that I had looming over me had turned into light. And now, with having this podcast, I get emails from all over the world telling me, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. I thought that I was the only one." So stuttering has been a blessing in my life.
Well, like you, I am a vampire slayer.
It's good to have you on my team. Now, what advice would you give to another stutterer?
It's the same advice that I give to everyone. It's what I want from every person that I meet. I just want you to be you. What happens is when you get to know somebody and they put on their costume or they put on their armor and you get to know them as that individual, if you have that ability to take that relationship to somewhere more meaningful, and you wake up one day and you show up at a baseball game or at a horse show or at a soccer pitch or wherever it might be, and that person is not who you thought they were. And I'm guilty of this myself because I put on one of my 17 voices. Who have you really invested that time in getting to know? I just want people to be them. But yet I have prepared over 90% of my responses to you in this podcast. So what fool am I?
Let me tell you, Mr. Curtis, that you are a huge inspiration to me. In hearing your story, you are so courageous. You are doing things that, in my mind, back in the day, would never have been a hint of what I could do. But you are out there, and you have a passion, and your passion is driving you to do what you love to do every day. And that is a true blessing.
I just can't see myself doing it any other way. And I don't know that I have to. But as I said from the beginning, I would say 99% of the people that say they know me don't know this about me. And that's why I respectfully call it my coming out, if you will. I am a horse show announcer. That's what I am. And that's all, honestly, I can see myself doing for the rest of my life, because it's a drug and it's got me, and I love doing it. I can't get away from it.
That is truly awesome. Okay, now, where can people find you if they want more information on you and the horse shows? and your podcast?
My website is based on a dressage term, and it's kind of long and complicated. But if you ride or know anyone that rides dressage, it's simple. It's www.seeyoutx.com. It's seeyoutx.com, all spelled out. And for those of you that don't know what that means, when a rider in some of the lower level tests come into the ring and salute to the judge that says, "I'm starting now." And when they finish, they do it at X. So it is, I am seeing you at X. So it's seeyoutx.com. The best way to get a hold of me is my personal Facebook page, which is Jason E. Curtis, or my fan page, simply Horse Show Announcer. And yes, I have a podcast, and it's called Welcome to the Barn. It too is a passion of mine. Now, when I do my podcast, again, everything is pretty much scripted out, or at least my questions are. I ask them the smart questions. I ask them to give me the smart questions to ask them.
Would like to thank you for spending time with me, Mr. Curtis. It has truly been an honor. I can now call you my friend and my vampire hunter - friend.
Pedro, I appreciate the opportunity and the privilege so much. It truly was my honor.
Thank you, sir. Now, down the road, I may have some more questions for you. As many of my podcast listeners, they have sent me questions. So I may have more for you down the road. And so this will not be our last time talking. We will meet again. But for now, I would like to say thank you. And let's say down the road, you do announce for the Paralympics. I would like to be there as well. Mr. Curtis, it has been a pleasure. It has been an honor to have you on My Stuttering Life. And we will continue the conversation. Thank you, sir.
Pedro Trace, I'm here forever.
There you have it. If you like this podcast, head on over to Apple iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review. You can follow me on all of my social media with My Stuttering Life. Thank you again, and we will talk again.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.